I'm praying you're in the playoffs. This will be the last rest of season running back rankings video you will see from yours truly, and we'll try to cover it all 3 weeks. But anyway, starting off tier 1, nothing has changed here. Oh my gosh, boo-hoo, Saquon Barkley only gave you 14.5 points this week. Obviously, 20 carries. We know he's the RB1. We know nobody comes close. People are making the argument that he's the MVP. Our running back's not the MVP, I'll tell you that much. But regardless, I mean, maybe he's the MVP for fantasy football, of course. I'm going over to what we have with our next tier. I think this tier is really shaping up. Achane obviously just gives you a super high floor with a receiving skill set where you get the 6 receptions, 45 receiving yards. Ignore the snap data. Achane was in and out of this game with an injury. He is good now, no hesitation. And if you look at the games where Tua's played in full, or Tua's played at all, you have 23, 29, 32, 10, 20, 20, 21, and 19 fantasy points. So full PPR format, Achane's an absolute crusher. Going over to Bijan. Bijan's also been an absolute crusher. Where you're looking over the past, I mean, oh dear God, how many games? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. You've had one game with fewer than 20 fantasy points. The floor that you are getting with Bijan Robinson is incredibly high. You even go through and you look at back-to-back weeks here where Kirk Cousins has straight up imploded and Bijan Robinson has still been great. And going into the future, if we get some better game environments for them to actually be able to run the ball here, Bijan Robinson could be even better. Going over to Derrick Henry, the issue with Henry, of course, is you're not going to have the receiving usage. Yes, you get the 29 receiving yards this past week, which was the highest mark that we have seen of Henry all season now. But you're banking on a touchdown. But I will say with Derrick Henry, you haven't seen a single game yet this year where he has not scored at least 10 fantasy points. Going over and looking at Joe Mixon, coming out of the bye, I mean, you should be super excited. You have the receiving skill set. You have the guaranteed carries. The man's averaging over 20 opportunities a game. Very little to discuss on that front. Now, dropping down to our next tier, Alvin Kamara used to be a top 3 running back in our rest of season rankings literally just last week. The reason Kamara is moving down a bit here is you have Kondre Miller actually getting involved, plus the injury that you have to Derek Carr now makes it where this should be an offense that goes from being a below average unit in projections every week to one of the worst teams in the league in projections. Even if you get Olave back, it's not going to help. You got no Derek Carr. This offense has been gutted top to bottom. Kamara's like the only guy that they have left. But with the changing coaching staff, Miller's maybe finally getting a fair crack at things. Still, Kamara in a full PPR format is a stud with the receiving usage. Get another 5 receptions this week for 35 receiving yards. So it just gives you such a high floor. Or if you're looking at Kamara, you've only had one game this season with fewer than double-digit fantasy points. Going over to Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs has not had a game this season with fewer than double-digit points. Gibbs doesn't give you the same receiving skills. I would say he has the skill set. They just don't have to use him as a receiver as much. The issue with Gibbs is you simply have David Montgomery here. If you had no Montgomery, you'd make an argument that Jahmyr Gibbs is in the same tier as Saquon Barkley, running behind the best offensive line in the league, in the best offense in the league. Now, we have Chase Brown going into the game tonight. I rate Chase Brown as a tier 1 player for this week. Great matchup against Dallas. If you're looking at Chase Brown on Underdog, they currently have him higher, lower, 102 total yards. This is in comparison to CeeDee Lamb, higher, lower, 73.5 total yards. So projections, super high with Chase Brown. For 4 straight games, he's had over 80% of the snaps in Cincinnati. Since you've had no Zach Moss, he is the 3-down feature back in one of the league's best offenses. And I really hope that Chase Brown and Rico Dowdle dominate the game tonight. I know we said this in the wide receiver rankings video, but I'm shooting for a bye in my fantasy playoffs. What I really, really need is I'm rooting for Mr. Salvetri. My guy, come through. We need Dowdle to outscore CeeDee Lamb. Dowdle's at higher, lower, 90.5 total yards. CeeDee Lamb's higher, lower, 73.5 total yards on Underdog for tonight. But of course, if y'all want to check out any of those pick'ems, you can find the link to Underdog Fantasy in the description, in the comment section. Code FLOCK will hook you up with a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you'll get a free Joe Burrow pick in tonight's game, more than less than half total yard. Going over and looking at Josh Jacobs. Jacobs, we have in a ton of Underdog drafts, so we are doing quite well. Last I checked, we're advancing like 40 Best Ball Mania teams. think 38-ish, right around there. We'll see what happens after the game tonight. Jacobs over the past 5 games that he's played, let's go past 6 games, has seen a total of, let me make sure my math is correct. The past 6 games, he's had 10 touchdowns. It's been incredible. I love to see it. Over the past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games, you've only had 1 contest where he's not scored 20 fantasy points. So Jacobs has been great. You could very easily make an argument to have him a tier above this. And going over to Kyren Williams has been great as well. Kyren Williams had a little stretch of stinker games there in the middle. A big issue that you have with Kyren and why he has to fall down to this range is you just don't have the consistent receiving usage as you did at the beginning of the year. At the beginning of the season, not only did Kyren Williams see just every single touch in his backfield, but also this was an offense that was willing to run the ball a little bit more at the goal line and check the ball down to the running back position a little more often. Now that you have Puka, now that you have Kupp, you're getting a lot more of just Matthew Stafford dropbacks and a significantly higher percentage of these targets going to wide receiver with fewer checkdowns. Now going over to David Montgomery. Montgomery in the league's best offense, running behind the best offensive line. You've only had 1 game this season with fewer than double-digit fantasy points. The man is averaging a touchdown a game as well. So super exciting. Must start play every single week. The issue is you have Gibbs, which is why he's not up in that top tier for us. If you had no Gibbs, David Montgomery would probably be up there at RB2, RB3. Going over to James Conner. James Conner has a phenomenal stretch of games coming up very, very soon. You get to go up against the Panthers. You get to go up against the Pats. And I need this dude to come through for us in a big-time way in the playoffs. Buddy, I'm rooting for you. You're my RB1. Looking at what we've seen back-to-back games here with 20-plus opportunities. I mean, most weeks this season, you've had 20-plus opportunities. Some of these blowout contests, you've seen Mercado mixed in. You've seen Trey Benson mixed in. But more times than not, James Conner is the 3-down bell cow. And the receiving involvement's gone up dramatically for James Conner since the first month of the season. Going over and looking at James Cook. James Cook, down performance against the Rams. Sadly, I did not get to watch any of the Rams-Bills game. But if you're looking at the larger sample, James Cook has still proven to be a running back that is going to get the rushing touchdowns. He will have the work in the red zone. And he's the running back that'll have the majority of the targets out of the backfield. He's been efficient with this role as well, so I don't see a reason that you would assume that, oh, Ray Davis is going to take it. Oh, no, Ty Johnson's going to take it. No, I think it's more likely than not James Cook rest of the season. When you get a game where Josh Allen has 6 touchdowns, it's clearly going to skew things. Going over and looking at our next player, we will have Jonathan Taylor here. With JT, the week before the bye, you get the 25 carries. Again, the fundamental issue that you have with this Colts offense is Anthony Richardson is not going to check the ball down. Not only is Anthony Richardson not going to check the ball down, but Anthony Richardson can vulture touchdowns at the goal line. Now, Taylor probably still remains a must-start running back every week regardless, simply because the man's going to see 90+% of the snaps and 100% of the opportunities here in Indy. But I don't know, not super, super exciting. Going through and looking at Breece Hall. Breece Hall's not healthy. We just have no idea if Breece is going to play. I mean, if Breece misses week 15, he'd be significantly lower in these rankings because who cares if he comes back in week 16? At that point, he's not really moving the needle for you. The last report that we have with Breece is they're not shutting him down for the season, but I don't know exactly what that means. Like, are we getting him back at all? Now, our next running back will be Chuba Hubbard. I mean, we have called it RIP season for Hubbard. I don't know if that makes sense. We've been preying on Hubbard's downfall for whatever reason, saying that Jonathan Brooks is going to come in and be something. Jonathan Brooks came in and was something for 1 week where Chuba Hubbard against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had 2.5 fantasy points. And then at the very beginning of this game against Philly, Jonathan Brooks, at the time of this recording, we don't know, non-contact knee injury. I'm pretty sure the dude tore his ACL. And that leads to Chuba Hubbard being the only running back left in Carolina. 31 opportunities against the Eagles. Better matchups in the future than Philly. You have no Sanders. You have no Brooks. Hubbard's a 3-down running back. Hubbard's a league winner. Somebody you're starting every single week, regardless of what the matchup is. True 3-down workhorse now. Going over and looking at Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco does expand the role here in Kansas City this week in a big time way. It was a really tough matchup against the Chargers, so I'm going to be holding too much against Pacheco here. I will say, though, he does have generally a pretty tough fantasy football playoff schedule, kind of regardless. But again, another week removed from the injury in week 15 should be even better. With Isaac Guerrero, he absolutely crushes. I had to play against him, freaking brutal. I really didn't know what to expect with this backfield in San Francisco. I didn't know if they were just going to use the feature back as they obviously do with McCaffrey, as they did with Jordan Mason at the beginning of the season. But nope, they used Isaac Guerrero as their dude. Guerrero was super efficient, looked really good. The 50 receiving yards, was off only 2 targets. It's almost impossible to rank Guerrero though, but just because we don't know the extent of his injury, we don't know if he will be good to go or not. I'm looking over at Aaron Jones. With Jones, he was pretty much the guy against Atlanta. You get the 16 fantasy points. You have 5 passing touchdowns for Darnold. I mean, you see Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson combined for 280 fantasy points. So in that environment, you're not really going to have a ton for Aaron Jones, of course. But the receiving involvement's there. It looks like where we were worried about the fumble issues in week 13, skewing them away from Jones. Maybe that's not as much of a concern. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we are going to be looking at Brian Robinson. With Robinson, honestly, I think we actually move him to the tier above this. The reason being is you have no Eckler. So with no Eckler, you'd have a very safe role. Of course, they have a couple other running backs they're willing to get involved. You're not going to have a ton of checkdowns for Brian Robinson in general. 1, Jaden Daniels can run the ball himself. 2, Brian Robinson's not a receiving back. But good offense. Brian Robinson, pretty good running back. Now leading off our next tier with Kenneth Walker. 1, I have no idea if Kenneth Walker is going to play this next week. And 2, I would assume even if Kenneth Walker is good to go, based off what Charbonnet just did, I'd be surprised if they just 100% lean into Kenneth Walker and go, hey man, you're going to get 75+% of this backfield. I mean, although we've been saying it forever now with Charbonnet. This dude isn't just some random backup running back. Charbonnet is very good. He was a stud at UCLA. He goes in round 2 of the NFL draft. He has the size to be a 3-down player. He has the receiving skill set. I know you're tired of hearing me say it, but I want to reiterate what we've said all along. If you have no Walker, Charbonnet's a running back 1 immediately. He's a bell cow. But if Walker plays, it's probably going to be a running back by committee. So if you had both running backs, well, you're hoping Kenneth Walker doesn't come back because you'd rather just start Charbonnet and only have one running back get all the work. I'm going over and looking at Najee. Najee does get you the rushing touchdown this week. I started the dude. We had nothing as a receiver. Didn't have a ton of rush dropbacks, but still just super frustrating. It's like, oh, cool. We get the 16 carries and the rushing touchdown. But frankly, it doesn't matter. You get the 11 fantasy points in a full PPR format. You just can't really compete with it. I'm going over to Rico Dowdle. I would have Dowdle higher than this in our rankings for the game tonight because 1, it is a great matchup against the Bengals, obviously worst defense in the league. And 2, because your boy is the biggest Rico Dowdle fanboy you could ever imagine for tonight. Please drop the hammer. Get me a bye week. Please, 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 Dowdle. If you look at Dowdle against Washington and the Giants, he really turned the corner. He had a really nice workload, 20 opportunities plus in both games, but also there are 2 games which the Cowboys win and games in which the Cowboys trail. I'm a little bit worried that they're not going to be able to run the ball as much. I'm going over and looking at Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. I just have no idea how to rank them right now. I will consistently update the rankings over on flogfantasy.com. Every single day we get injury news. Y'all know I'm tinkering with these ranks. The thing is, if Bucky Irving's 100% good to go, Bucky's a must-start running back. If Bucky's out, Rachaad White's 100% a must-start running back. So it is very difficult. If Bucky kind of plays pseudo-injured and they just play it safe with Bucky and involve Rachaad White and involve Sean Tucker, then it's just going to be a muddied mess where maybe he can't start anybody, but we are just waiting for clarity. Tyrone Tracy, obviously, you can make an argument to move him higher than this. Tracy, fine game against New Orleans. Just horrendous offense. And yeah, when you play against New Orleans and you have 5 targets, maybe you are going to be viable, but in other contests where you actually end up seeing the Giants get boat raced and you don't see the game be competitive, I'd maybe be a little bit more concerned than this. Now going over and looking at Tony Pollard. Pollard, has the 3-down workload against Jacksonville. Great matchup for Pollard. Great projections with this game where the Titans were favored by about 5 points. Was excited to start Pollard. He gets you the 124 total yards, but no touchdown. There aren't going to be very many touchdowns in this offense in general. It's one of the worst offenses in the league. And now you have Will Levis injured, so it's even harder to project touchdowns here in Tennessee. I'm going down to our next tier. We have Zach Charbonnet leading us off. Again, I'm recording this super late Sunday night. If we get news that Kenneth Walker is going to be missing time, like if you tell me, Mason, Kenneth Walker is out rest of season, exactly what we did as soon as Walker was ruled out this past week, where we moved Zach Charbonnet into the top 12 running backs on flogfantasy.com, I will do the same thing. If you have no Kenneth Walker, again, Charbonnet immediately becomes a top 12 running back. I would have Charbonnet right up there with Chase Brown, Josh Jacobs. But if Walker does come in, I'm afraid that Charbonnet will have a role, but I don't know if it's a role that's large enough to start. I'm going to move DeAndre Swift even lower than this. I'm going to have Swift behind Ramondre Stevenson. Just like, why the hell? I can never freaking start DeAndre Swift again. Swift over the next 2 weeks, you just get the worst matchups imaginable going up against, the Lions, going up against the Vikings. You haven't had a game with 20 fantasy points for DeAndre Swift since week 6. With Ramondre Stevenson, I myself am probably going to be playing him over DeAndre Swift in the fantasy playoffs. Yeah, you have some receiving work. Issue is garbage offense. We have not seen a touchdown from Ramondre Stevenson since week 9. You have not had a game with more than 15 fantasy points for Ramondre Stevenson since week 9. But also, since then, you've had 3 games with 20-plus opportunities. So really what you need to see is Drake May just improve dramatically coming out of the bye week. Looking at Jaylen Warren just gives you a very high floor. Over the past month, you've seen 4, 4, 4, and 5 targets. So if you were desperate and you really needed to start somebody, you can start Jaylen Warren even with the healthy Najee Harris. But you're more excited about Jaylen with the handcuff appeal that if Najee were to go down, Warren becomes a must-start option. Nick Chubb, Gus Edwards, both running backs are inefficient backs that will not catch a single ball to save their life. Nick Chubb so far this season has played 7 games, and the man's sitting with 31 receiving yards. Gus Edwards has played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games, and he is sitting with 3 receiving yards. Running backs in committees with no receiving skill set, full PPR format, really tough to trust. Going over and looking at Braylon Allen, this is an RB that is also very difficult to trust. I don't know the situation with the Breece Hall injury, but we saw this past week, even if Hall is injured, Braylon Allen's going to split the backfield with Isaiah Davis. So in that context, it frankly doesn't matter. I don't want Braylon Allen if he's committee back in a bad offense. Kareem Hunt looks like Pacheco has just taken over for him. Jerome Ford is just in a committee where if the Browns fall to a big time deficit, then Ford's probably ended up playing a little bit more than Chubb. Javonte Williams played 45% of the snaps before the bye. We haven't seen 20 points from Javonte since back in week 7. That was his only game with 20 fantasy points this season. Looking at Tank Bigsby, Travis Etienne, their committee backs in a garbage offense, no interest. Ray Davis, Tyler Algier, premium handcuff backs, and that's about it. I don't even know why we're putting Alexander Madison on here. Maybe it's just so we can say, the Raiders running backs, Sincere McCormick, Alexander Madison. It's a muddied mess. They're all injured. We don't know who's going to play. And even if they do play, cool, you get to play in an offense where Desmond Ridder is your quarterback. But I think that's all I got for you. Of course, if you wanted to root for yours truly to get a bye, what we need in tonight's game is Dowdle to outscore Lamb. Let's go for it. And if you wanted to check out any of the pick'ems for tonight's game, whether that's Dowdle, higher or lower 90.5 total yards, Lamb, higher or lower 73.5, Chase Brown, higher or lower 102.5 total yards, you can find the link to Underdog Fantasy in the description or comment section. Available in damn near every state. Yes, it's in California. Yes, it's in Texas. Yes, it's in New York. Yes, it's in Florida. If you use promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you'll be getting a free Joe Burrow pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game tonight. But I think that's all I got for you. Really appreciate you and really hope we get to see you out with the live stream later tonight.